Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. As hard as it is to believe, we're already 25% of the way through 2024, and if you've been tuning into the channel for a while now, you probably know that can only mean one thing. It's time for another edition of Dumbest International Criminals, our quarterly recurring series where we take a look at some of the dumbest criminals in world crime stories that we've covered so far in a given year on Crimes of the Week International. One thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so minor details and things like specific charges may have been updated since we first covered them. Also, if you like these videos, be sure to let us know in the comment section below. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Authorities in the island nation of Singapore say that a 58-year-old man was officially sentenced to jail time at the end of last month after he was convicted of using false identity documents more than a decade ago to enter the country, though it's not for the reason you might think. The whole thing started all the way back in 1991 when the man in question, Andrew Lu Eng, left Singapore and went to live in Malaysia. A few years later, he paid a friend 5,700 Singapore dollars, or about $4,300 US, to obtain a fraudulent Malaysian identity card under a new name, which he in turn used to obtain a legitimate Malaysian passport and other identity documents under his new fake identity. Once he had his Malaysian passport, Lu began traveling back to Singapore to visit his family. He did this several times, especially between the years of 2008 and 2009. It wasn't until last year that authorities discovered who Lu really was, though, at which point he was arrested and charged with several crimes under the country's Immigration Act. At this point, you might be wondering why Lu did all of this. Was he an undocumented immigrant, or perhaps some other type of economic migrant who wasn't supposed to be in the country? Nope. It turns out he's a Singaporean citizen. The real reason Lu had gone to such great lengths to try and conceal his identity was because he thought the government might be after him for his involvement in a gang fight back in 1991. The only problem with this was that no one had ever actually told Lu he was a wanted man. Apparently, he just assumed that completely on his own. I'm reminded of that old saying, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. Anyway, luckily for Lu, his punishment isn't too severe. However, he will have to spend 20 weeks in jail for the fake identity-related offenses. Authorities in southern Wales say that a bumbling criminal has been sentenced to prison time this week following a burglary last summer in which he made several clumsy mistakes that ultimately led to his arrest and conviction. The whole thing started in the early hours of June 3rd, 2023, when the man in question, 38-year-old Jason Jones, broke into a house in Church Village. After stealing a number of items belonging to the victim, including their wallet and car keys, he hopped into their vehicle and drove off. Unfortunately for Jones, he wouldn't get to enjoy the profits of his crime for very long. After buying food from a McDonald's with the victim's bank card in the next village over, he crashed the stolen vehicle, forcing him to flee on foot. It didn't take a genius to solve the case from there. In addition to ample CCTV footage linking Jones to the crime, he left behind a coffee cup from his fast food order in the crashed car that was covered in his DNA. This week, Jones was sentenced to 4 years in prison for the crime. He was disqualified from driving for a further 8. Officials in Japan say that a 55-year-old man is in custody this week after he quite literally went beast mode during the middle of a flight, attacking a crew member and forcing the plane to turn around. The incident took place in the early morning hours of January 17th aboard All Nippon Airways Flight 118. The flight was supposed to travel from Tokyo to Seattle. However, much to the chagrin of the 159 passengers on board, they would barely make it out over the Pacific Ocean before having to turn back. While it's not clear exactly what happened, according to reports, a 55-year-old drunk American man is to blame. Not long into the journey, he apparently had a full-on freakout during which he bit the arm of a female flight attendant. After landing back at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, the 55-year-old unidentified man was arrested. He claimed that he had taken a sleeping pill and could not remember what had happened. At the time of this recording, he apparently remains in custody, though no information about possible charges has yet been provided. Representatives from Brazil's military police say that a 43-year-old is facing charges this week after she drunkenly tried to steal a bus, only to almost immediately crash the vehicle and get herself arrested. According to reports, the whole thing happened at around 9:40 p.m. on January 16th when a bus driver pulled over at a stop in São Paulo's East Zone. While getting out to hand a report to an inspector on the line, he left his keys in the vehicle's ignition. He was only gone for a few moments, but apparently that was more than enough time for 43-year-old Erica Custodio, who immediately noticed the bus was unoccupied. After climbing on board, Custodio allegedly made a beeline for the driver's seat. Fortunately, she didn't make it very far though, as after just a few seconds behind the wheel, she smashed into the back of 4 taxis that were parked in front of her, causing the bus to become stuck. In a video of the incident that was recorded by witnesses, Custodio can be heard being yelled at by the taxi drivers, who are understandably pissed about what has just happened. Custodio, however, appears to be in no fit state to communicate. The reason why became apparent when police arrived at the scene and placed the 43-year-old under arrest. She reportedly reeked of alcohol, was having trouble standing up straight, and was noticeably slurring her words. Custodio is now facing multiple charges, including theft, drunk driving, and driving without permission or license. At the time of this recording, she remains in custody. Is that a tortoise in your pants? Or are you just trying to rob me? That's what I imagine was going through the head of one Taiwanese pet store owner this week when he discovered an alleged thief inside of his shop who tried to pull off quite the bizarre crime. According to reports, the whole thing started at around 4 p.m. on January 21st when an aquarium store owner in the city of Tainan noticed something strange as he was walking through the aisles of his store. While looking for customers who might need help, he instead came across a 57-year-old man, later identified by the last name of Chen, who was both looking and acting rather strange. The owner soon discovered why when he saw the giant bulge in one of the pockets of Chen's jeans. As if on cue, out fell a small Brazilian turtle, which the 57-year-old had clearly stolen from one of the store's tanks. Though Chen attempted to flee the scene after this not-so-subtle gaffe, he was quickly stopped after the owner managed to flag down police. The owner then handed Chen a bucket, who proceeded to pull 14 other turtles out of his pants. Apparently, the animals altogether retailed for about 6,500 new Taiwan dollars, or about $200 US. Unsurprisingly, Chen was arrested at the scene and is now facing theft charges. While hopefully the lesson that the 57-year-old learns from this is that stealing is wrong, if he is planning any future criminal endeavors, he might want to think about adjusting his approach. As one local journalist hilariously put it, he might have gotten away with it if he hadn't been so greedy, or if he had simply invested in a pair of pants with deeper pockets. A 31-year-old man from Sapporo, Japan, may want to lay off the city's namesake beer for a while after he was arrested following an alleged drunken break-in at a school. According to reports, the whole thing began at around 5:45 a.m. on January 27th, when police were alerted that an alarm had been triggered at a local middle school. They arrived at the scene to find that the glass had been shattered on one of the building's front doors, and when they investigated further, they soon discovered why. The culprit was a 31-year-old man who was found sleeping on the floor in front of the school's staff room. Upon being woken up, the man, who was still clearly intoxicated, attempted to explain his actions. He said that he had been drinking all night in the city's Susukino district and claimed that he thought the school was his home. When he got there and his key wouldn't fit the lock, naturally he assumed it was the door's fault and apparently kicked in the glass so he could go inside. The man was arrested at the scene on suspicion of breaking and entering, as well as property destruction. His name has not been released at this time. A Singaporean man reportedly won't have a whole lot going on for the next couple weeks after he was sentenced to jail time in connection with a fake crime he reported last year, a stunt which he ironically pulled off out of boredom. According to reports, the whole thing started at around 9:40 p.m. on April 28, 2023, when police were alerted about a possible crime by a friend of 48-year-old Eddie Mazawan. The friend said that he had just received a call from Mazawan, who claimed that he had just been mugged by 3 Chinese guys outside of his housing board block in the town of Bukit Batok. He further claimed that one of them had tried to snatch his bag as they had walked past. Concerned, the friend had run down there immediately and contacted police along the way. When police arrived at the scene, Mazawan initially told them the same story he had to his friend. However, as he was pressed for more information, things started to crumble. First, he changed the timing of the incident, saying that it had actually happened 2 weeks earlier. A few hours into his interview with police, he admitted that nothing had actually happened at all. He said he made up the story to prank his friend because he was bored. Now, I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with the Singaporean legal system, but suffice it to say, they don't fuck around when it comes to law and order. This is a country that is notorious for killing people for relatively low-level drug offenses. Seriously, they will put you on death row for half a kilo of weed. This week, Mazawan pleaded guilty to 1 count of giving false information to a public servant and was sentenced to 12 days in jail. It appears he got off easy, too. Had the court decided not to go easy on him, he could have ended up with a 2-year prison sentence and a large fine. Authorities in France say that a young man is in custody this week following an embarrassing gaffe in which he accidentally left his phone at the scene of a crime, then tried to call to get it back. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on February 2nd when the suspect, a minor who has not been identified by name, was committing a burglary at an apartment in the Paris suburb of Colombes. He was right in the middle of the crime when the owner of the place came home, causing him to grab what he could and run for it. Though the young suspect was allegedly able to grab the unidentified victim's laptop before fleeing, unfortunately for him, he quickly realized that he had made a mistake. In his haste to escape, he had left behind his phone at the scene. Unbelievably, the suspect called his phone several minutes later and spoke with the person he had just robbed. He offered to return the laptop if he could get his phone back, to which the victim agreed. They then called the police. Obviously, the suspect didn't think this through, because apparently he actually showed back up at the crime scene later that morning. When he did, police were waiting, who placed him under arrest. Authorities in the southern Thai province of Narathiwat say that a 28-year-old man is facing charges this week, following a bizarre incident in which he allegedly tried to steal a farm animal while drunk, only to have his harebrained scheme quickly backfire. According to reports, the whole thing began sometime on February 2nd, when police were called to the scene of an accident in Su-ngai Padi district. Officers arrived to find a silver sedan lying in a ditch at the side of a local road, which was smashed up and had rolled fully onto one side. Police quickly turned their attention to the 28-year-old driver, a man named Mustaqim May. He had managed to escape the wreckage with only minor injuries, though was quite clearly under the influence of alcohol. Understandably, authorities initially thought they were dealing with an open and shut drunk driving case. That was, until they noticed something else. Peering out through the smashed back window of the overturned vehicle was the head of a very confused black cow. When asked about the cow, May said that the animal belonged to his father-in-law, who had given it to him a little while earlier. He said that all he had to transport the cow was his small car, so he tried to make the best of what he had. May's wife arrived shortly thereafter and backed up her husband's story. The situation got even stranger, though, when a local farmer named Kla ran up to the scene and said that May and his wife were lying. He claimed that the cow belonged to him and that May had stolen it after he let the animal out to graze in his field. At this point, May apparently began changing his story, telling officers that he never meant to steal the cow. He now claimed that he had been driving when he encountered the animal blocking the roadway. The situation made him angry, so naturally he decided the best course of action was to cram the cow into the back of his sedan and take it home. May said the animal got scared while he was driving, and that was why he lost control of the vehicle. Police were apparently not convinced by May's shifting stories and ended up charging him with stealing property belonging to a farmer. If convicted, he could be looking at a sentence of up to 5 years, as well as a fine of between 20,000 and 100,000 baht, or about $560 to $2,800 US. In case you were wondering, it appears that the cow involved in the incident was unharmed. A 34-year-old Englishman has reportedly been banned from driving as well as handed a large chunk of community service hours following a recent incident in which he was caught for drunk driving after deciding to take a nap in the middle of the road. According to reports, the whole thing started in the early morning hours of January 28th when officers from the Cambridgeshire police were on patrol near the town of Godmanchester. It was around 4:15 a.m. and they were driving down the A1307, a divided two-lane highway, when they spotted a car that was sitting in the middle of the road. At first, officers thought the car was broken down, so they pulled over to offer the motorist some assistance. However, when they got up to the driver's side window of the vehicle, a Mercedes C220, they realized what was actually going on. The man inside, later identified as 34-year-old Emmanuel Osai, was taking a nap. He still had his seatbelt on, and the vehicle's engine was running. Understandably, police suspected that Emmanuel might have been under the influence of alcohol, so after some questions, they asked him to submit to a roadside test, one which he did not pass.
Hello mate, you alright? Yeah. Can you open the door for me please? What's up sir?
Oh, it's a little bit tight, that's right. Okay, now I'm rested.
You're parked and you're rested in the middle of a dual carriageway?
Oh no, not this one.
Have you had any alcohol this evening? Yes?
Yes.
Right. You're in the middle of the road? This isn't a lay-by.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of the road. And this is a junction, and yours just stops here. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, stop. Okay, so you failed.
I love that bit at the end there. You failed. Anyway, all jokes aside, thankfully no one was hurt as a result of this incident. Emmanuel has since pleaded guilty to drunk driving and was handed a 3.5-year driving ban as well as 120 hours of community service. Officials in Cambodia say that a pair of Taiwanese men have been sentenced to prison time this week, days after they allegedly filmed and posted content for a YouTube channel in which they fraudulently claimed to be the victims of a kidnapping gang. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on February 12th, when Chen Nangchuan, better known by his YouTube name Goodnight Chicken, posted a series of videos to his channel in which he claimed that he and his friend Lu Tzu-sien had been abducted. In the footage, Chen and Lu apparently said that they had been targeted by a gang of kidnappers and that they were in desperate need of help. Initially, the videos seemed to have been taken quite seriously, and for good reason. The area where the two men were staying, in the port city of Sihanoukville, is notorious for these kinds of crimes. In particular, criminal gangs abducting victims and then forcing them to carry out online scams. Things got even more alarming the following day when Chen's wife posted on social media saying that her husband had gone missing. However, things started to change a short time later when Chen posted another video during which he spoke of a miraculous escape. He said that he and Lu had managed to run away from their captors and showed off his partially shaved head as evidence, which he claimed had happened during the ordeal. Some viewers, though, thought that the whole thing was a little too good to be true, causing some of them to investigate further. One of those who found the situation hard to believe was another online personality named Lu Yu, who upon studying the footage was able to figure out where it had been shot. Through this, he realized that Chen and his friend were not running away as they claimed. They were simply circling the same area. Lu also brought up another good point. If the man had really been taken captive, why had their abductors allowed them to keep their live streaming equipment? Not long after this, Chen and Lu were arrested at their hotel room. Inside, police reportedly recovered a number of props used in the hoax. A few days later, they were found guilty on charges of incitement to cause chaos to Social Security. The men have now both been sentenced to 2 years in prison and handed a fine worth the equivalent of about $2,000 US. Authorities in the Australian state of Victoria say that a teenage car thief got more than he bargained for this week after he attempted to flee the scene of a crash he caused in a stolen vehicle, only to be taken down by one of the victims, who just so happened to be an off-duty police officer. According to reports, the incident began at around 6:40 p.m. on February 20th, when police were alerted about the 16-year-old suspect, who was driving the stolen vehicle in question in the Melbourne suburb of Carrum. The teen proceeded to head north on the Nepean Highway to the adjacent suburb of Chelsea, where he caused an accident while driving recklessly. The accident apparently took place after the 16-year-old drove onto the wrong side of the road and ran a red light, leading him to smash into 2 other vehicles. Once the stolen car was immobilized, the teen suspect attempted to make a run for it, though unfortunately for him, he wouldn't get very far. It turned out that one of the people he hit was an off-duty female detective who chased him down and arrested him as backup arrived at the scene. While the suspect's name has not been revealed at the time of this recording, police say he is now facing a number of charges in connection with the dangerous incident. These include aggravated burglary, theft of a motor vehicle, reckless conduct endangering serious injury, and other driving-related offenses. Authorities in South Australia say that a man is facing charges this week following a bizarre and poorly thought-out carjacking targeting a taxi driver. According to reports, the whole thing started at around 4 a.m. on March 3rd, when the victim, an unidentified taxi driver in the city of Adelaide, picked up the suspect on King William Street in the city's central business district. The man said that he wanted to go to Hindley Street, however, things quickly went sideways. After getting inside, the suspect allegedly punched the driver in the shoulder and forced him out of the vehicle. He then drove off, leaving the driver stranded. Unfortunately for the suspect, his getaway was short-lived. The vehicle was equipped with GPS tracking, and it was quickly followed, leading police to a McDonald's in the suburb of Preah. It was here, in the drive-through line, that the man was cornered and placed under arrest. At the time of this recording, the suspect has only been identified as a 36-year-old man, though it's said that he is now facing charges including illegal use, assault, and property damage. Representatives from the Singapore police force say that a 33-year-old Chinese tourist is in hot water this week after he allegedly tried to extort his own aunt for ransom money by faking his own kidnapping. The whole thing apparently started on March 1st, when 33-year-old Lu Changjian traveled from his home in China to Singapore for what was supposed to be a 5-day vacation. When he failed to return, his family understandably got worried. Their concern quickly turned to alarm when on March 7th, Lu's aunt, Lu Yabo, started receiving texts on the messaging platform WeChat saying that her nephew had been kidnapped. The messages, which were from a number that the aunt didn't recognize, claimed that they had taken Lu and that they were now holding him captive. They further threatened that he wouldn't be released until they received a ransom of 30,000 yuan, or about $4,200 US. A picture of Lu's identity documents were sent as proof that the threats were legitimate. Instead of paying, though, Lu's aunt alerted his father, who in turn called Singapore police on March 9th. It took them just 3 hours to figure out what had actually happened. According to reports, Lu was in no actual danger and instead had been hanging out at the Marina Bay Sands casino. He allegedly sent the threatening texts to his aunt himself in a bid to recover some of the money he had lost gambling during his vacation. The 33-year-old's total losses are estimated to be between 20,000 and 30,000 Singaporean dollars, or about $15,000 to $23,000 US. Lu was arrested and has now been charged with attempted cheating, though the charge might not sound that serious. As we've mentioned several times in previous editions of this show, Singapore really isn't a place where you want to commit crimes. If convicted, Luke could be looking at up to 10 years in prison and a hefty fine. Authorities on the Thai island of Phuket say that a 21-year-old woman is facing charges this week after she allegedly stole money from her workplace and lost it on risky currency exchange markets, then attempted to cover up the crime by claiming she had been the victim of a crime. The whole thing started at around 3 p.m. on March 25th, when the suspect, Tainan Han Kamjorn, showed up at a local police station in the community of Kamala Beach. The 21-year-old, who works as a manager for a luxury villa in the area, proceeded to tell officers a harrowing tale. She said that she had been on her way home from work when she was attacked by a knife-wielding robber. The man had stolen everything from her, including 100,000 baht, or roughly $2,700 US in cash, that belonged to customers of her employer and were meant to be deposits on villa properties. At first, it apparently looked like Chananchita was telling the truth. Her story was incredibly detailed, and she even had a knife wound on her leg that seemed to attest to the terrifying nature of the attack. However, it wasn't long before the whole thing came crumbling down. It turned out that Chananchita's detailed story actually worked against her, especially when police found time-stamped photos from surveillance cameras in the area that contradicted what she had told them. They also took a look at her bank accounts, discovering some unusual financial activity. Realizing that she had been caught, the 21-year-old eventually confessed. Chananchita told police that the 100,000 baht worth of customer deposit money was real, only she was the one that had actually stolen it. Her plan was to invest the cash in risky forex trading, believing that she could return all the money before anyone noticed once her gamble paid off. Except, it didn't pay off. Instead, Chananchita lost all of the money. Realizing that she was screwed, the 21-year-old came up with one last scheme to save herself. She decided to fake a robbery, claiming that was how the money was stolen. Following her confession, Chananchita was arrested. So far, she has been charged with filing false statements with law enforcement, though we imagine there will likely also be some fraud charges in her near future. I'm just going to say right off the bat that there's not much to this last segment. I'll be honest, I included it because it's just one of those what the f*** Japan stories that I wanted to share with you all. Authorities in Japan's Miyagi Prefecture say that a 48-year-old man has been arrested this week following a bizarre incident in which he destroyed a casino gaming machine with his own bodily fluids. According to reports, the whole thing happened just after 1 p.m. on March 9th at a pachinko parlor in the city of Sendai. For those unfamiliar, pachinko is a famous Japanese pastime. It's sort of a cross between an arcade game and a gambling machine. Basically, you try to get a bunch of these little silver balls into various areas on the game board to earn points, which in turn earn you more little silver balls. These balls can then be redeemed for prizes. Anyway, on this particular afternoon, workers at the pachinko parlor heard an alarm going off on one of the machines. They went over to find that the machine was malfunctioning. They learned the disgusting reason why when they had a look at the building's surveillance. A man, later identified as 48-year-old Takahiro Shianuma, had poured a bunch of urine all over it. He was arrested the following day when he unbelievably returned to the pachinko parlor like nothing had happened. After being taken into custody, Shianuma claimed that he didn't remember what had happened because he was drunk the previous day. I mean, to me, that's kind of beside the point, though. I want to know why he was carrying around all that piss. Anyway, at the time of this recording, the 48-year-old remains in custody. He has now been charged with suspicion of property destruction. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.